Jake Morrison opened his eyes to darkness and the taste of blood in his mouth. His head felt like someone had hit it with a plasma wrench, and his left shoulder burned with the familiar sting of neural dampener burns. He tried to move and found himself lying on cold metal grating in what looked like a maintenance tunnel deep in the belly of Kepler Station. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and engine coolant. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the steady hum of the fusion reactors that kept the massive space station alive. Jake pushed himself up slowly, fighting waves of dizziness that made the tunnel walls spin around him. His engineering uniform was torn and dirty, and his crew badge was gone. What had happened to him? The last thing Jake remembered was working, late in Engineering Bay 7, checking the power readings from the station's main fusion core. The numbers had been wrong for weeks now, showing energy spikes that made no sense according to the maintenance logs. Commander Lisa Hayes had told him it was nothing to worry about, just normal fluctuations from the old Zenthari equipment. But Jake knew better. He had been an engineer for 15 years, starting as a kid fixing mining equipment on the outer colonies before working his way up to chief engineer on one of humanity's most important trading stations. Jake could read power systems like other people read books, and something was very wrong with Kepler Station's energy grid. Jake felt around in his pockets and found his personal datapad was gone, along with his access cards and even his emergency beacon. Someone had taken everything that could identify him or call for help. He was alone in the maintenance tunnels with no way to contact his crew or prove who he was. As his head cleared, memories started coming back in pieces. He had been in the engineering bay, downloading the power grid data to his personal pad when the lights went out. In the emergency lighting, he had seen shapes moving toward him. There had been voices, someone saying his name, and then the sharp pain of a neural dampener hitting his neck. Jake tried to remember more, but everything after that was blank. Neural dampeners were supposed to be non-lethal weapons used by station security to stop dangerous criminals, but they could cause serious brain damage if used wrong. Whoever had attacked him wanted him alive but helpless. He started walking through the maintenance tunnel, using his hands to feel along the walls in the dim emergency lighting. The tunnel stretched in both directions, part of the huge network of service passages that ran through Kepler Station like veins in a body. Jake had explored some of these tunnels during his 3 years on the station, but this section was unfamiliar. After walking for what felt like an hour, Jake found a maintenance access panel that was still active. He pressed his palm against the bioscanner, hoping his biological signature was still in the system. The panel beeped and displayed a basic station map showing his location. Jake was shocked to see he was nearly 20 levels below the main engineering decks in a section of the station that was supposed to be sealed off. The panel also showed the current date and time. Jake stared at the numbers in disbelief. According to the display, he had been unconscious for 3 days. 3 whole days had passed since someone had attacked him in the engineering bay. His crew would think he was dead or missing. And Commander Hayes would have reported his disappearance to station security. Jake tried to access more information through the panel, but his security clearance had been revoked. According to the system, Chief Engineer Jake Morrison was listed as deceased, killed in an explosion in Engineering Bay 7 caused by sabotage. The official report said he had been trying to overload the fusion reactor when security tried to stop him. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Someone had not only attacked him, but had also framed him for sabotage. They had made it look like he was trying to destroy the station, and now everyone believed he was a terrorist who had died in his own bomb. His crew, his friends, everyone thought he was a traitor and a murderer. Jake sat down hard on the tunnel floor as the full weight of his situation hit him. He was trapped in the lower levels of an alien space station with no identification, no money, no friends, and no way to prove his innocence. Worse, he was officially dead, which meant no one would be looking for him. He could wander these tunnels forever and never be found. But Jake was an engineer, and engineers solved problems. He stood up and started thinking through his situation, like it was a broken machine that needed fixing. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to frame him and fake his death, which meant they needed him out of the way for a reason. The power grid problems he had been investigating were real, and now he was sure they were connected to whatever was happening. Jake remembered his crew: Danny Carter, his best friend and second in command; Maria Santos, the best power systems specialist he had ever worked with; and Pete Williams, the young engineer who reminded Jake of himself at that age. They were good people and smart engineers. If they thought about it, they would realize that Jake would never try to sabotage the station he had spent 3 years keeping running. The question was whether they would have the chance to think about it. Commander Hayes was in charge now, and she had been the one telling Jake to ignore the power problems. If she was involved in framing him, she would make sure his crew stayed quiet and followed orders. Jake looked at the maintenance panel again and saw something that gave him hope. The bioscanner had logged his access, but it showed his status as maintenance worker rather than deceased. Someone in the system had created a false identity for him, probably to explain why his biosignature was still active in the lower levels. That meant someone expected him to be alive down here. Whether that someone was friend or enemy, Jake could not tell yet, but it gave him a starting point. He was Jake Morrison, engineer and problem solver, and he was very much alive. The people who had tried to destroy him had made their first mistake by leaving him breathing. Now he had to figure out how to survive in the belly of an alien space station long enough to find out who had betrayed him and why. Jake spent his first week in the lower levels learning that Kepler Station was much bigger than he had ever imagined. The maintenance tunnels connected to vast chambers filled with machinery that hummed with alien purpose, and there were entire sections that did not appear on any human maps. Some areas were so old that dust had settled into patterns that looked like they had not been disturbed for centuries. On his third day of wandering, Jake discovered he was not alone in the forgotten parts of the station. He heard voices echoing through a large chamber and followed the sound carefully, staying in the shadows. What he found surprised him more than anything else since waking up in the tunnels. A small group of people had made a camp in one of the larger rooms, using salvaged materials to create sleeping areas and a basic kitchen. There were humans, but also aliens that Jake recognized as Xanthari, the species that officially ran Kepler Station. They were working together, sharing food and tools like they were all part of the same community. Jake watched from hiding as a young Xanthari with bright blue skin worked on repairing a water recycler, while an older human man helped by holding parts. The Xanthari spoke in accented but clear human language, explaining how the ancient systems worked. The human listened carefully and asked good questions that showed he understood engineering principles. After watching for several hours, Jake decided to take a chance. He stepped out of the shadows with his hands visible and empty. The group immediately tensed and several people reached for improvised weapons, but they did not attack right away. "I am Jake," he said simply. "I am an engineer, and I am lost." The young Xanthari studied him with large golden eyes that seemed to see right through him. "You are the one they call dead," the alien said. "The saboteur who tried to destroy the fusion core." Jake felt his heart sink, but he kept his voice steady. "I did not sabotage anything. Someone framed me and left me down here to die. Many who end up in the deep levels have similar stories," said the older human man. "Some are even true." The Xanthari held up a hand for silence and continued studying Jake. "I am called Zix. I was chief maintenance engineer for the lower systems, until I questioned why so many safety protocols were being ignored. My supervisors said I was being disloyal to proper authority and sent me here to think about my mistakes." Jake realized that Zix had also been exiled for asking inconvenient questions. What kind of safety protocols? "The old systems that keep the station stable are being bypassed," Zix explained. "Important machinery is being shut down or rerouted without proper testing. When I tried to file reports, I was told the changes were classified and not my concern." This was the first real information Jake had heard about what might be happening above. "Can you show me these systems?" Zix exchanged glances with the other people in the camp. The older human man nodded slowly. "If you are who you say you are, you might be able to help us understand what we are seeing. But if you are working for the people upstairs, you already know too much." Jake spent the next several days with Zix and the others, learning about the hidden community that existed in the deep levels of Kepler Station. There were about 30 people in total, most of them maintenance workers, failed colonists, or refugees. From various conflicts who had somehow ended up in the forgotten sections of the station, they had created their own small society based on mutual aid and shared resources. The group included Danny Murphy, a former mining engineer who had been blacklisted for reporting safety violations, Lisa Park, a doctor who had lost her license for treating patients without proper documentation, and several Zenthari who had been exiled for various forms of questioning authority. They had learned to live off the scraps and surplus that fell through the cracks of the station's official systems. More importantly, they had been watching the changes happening in the station's infrastructure. Zix showed Jake through sections of ancient machinery that the Zenthari themselves did not fully understand. The technology was clearly not Zenthari in origin, built with principles that were more advanced than anything either humans or Zenthari currently used. My people found this station drifting in space thousands of years ago, Zix explained as they walked through a chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light. We learned to use some of its systems, but we never understood how it really works. The original builders disappeared long before the Zenthari became space travelers. Jake studied the crystal formations and the way they connected to the power conduits running through the walls. The engineering was unlike anything he had seen before, but there were patterns he could recognize. Energy flowed through the crystals in ways that suggested they were not just power storage but also some kind of computing system. These are not just machines, Jake said. They are thinking machines. The whole station is one big computer that can run itself. Zix looked at him with surprise. How can you tell that? Our best engineers have studied these systems for generations without understanding their purpose. Jake pointed to the way the crystal patterns changed as they watched, shifting like thoughts moving through a vast brain. I have worked with computer systems my whole life. This is what thinking looks like when you make it out of crystal instead of metal and silicon. Over the following days, Jake began to understand that the power grid problems he had been investigating were connected to these ancient systems. Someone was deliberately interfering with the builder technology, causing it to activate in ways that had not happened for centuries. The energy spikes he had detected were the station's original systems, trying to compensate for damage and interference. Zix confirmed that the sabotage was being done by people with high-level access to both human and Zenthari systems. They are not just stealing power, Zix explained. They are trying to force the old systems to reveal their secrets by creating controlled failures. Jake realized that whoever had framed him was part of a much larger operation. They were not just covering up theft or corruption, but were actively trying to unlock alien technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The fake sabotage charges against him were meant to explain away the real sabotage they were doing. As Jake learned more about the hidden community and the ancient systems, he also began to understand that he had skills that could help both. His engineering knowledge let him repair and improve the jury-rigged systems that kept the community alive, while his understanding of modern human technology helped him interface with the builder systems in ways that even Zix had not thought possible. More importantly, Jake realized that he was not just hiding in the deep levels anymore. He was learning things that the people who had framed him would kill to keep secret. The question was what he could do with that knowledge while trapped in the forgotten sections of an alien space station with no way to contact the outside world. Danny Carter stood in Engineering Bay 7 staring at a power routing solution that made no sense, according to everything he had been taught about Kepler Station's systems. The repair work was brilliant, elegant, and completely impossible according to the official technical manuals. More importantly, it was exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that Jake Morrison had been famous for. This is the third time this month, Maria Santos said, pointing to her readings. Someone is fixing problems in the power grid before we even know they exist. The energy flows are more stable than they have been in years, but none of our people are doing this work. Pete Williams looked up from his diagnostic scanner. The system logs show routine maintenance, but the techniques being used are not in any manual I have seen. Whoever is doing this knows builder technology better than anyone on the official engineering staff. Danny had been thinking the same thing for weeks now. Ever since Jake's supposed death, mysterious repairs had been appearing throughout the station's infrastructure. Problems were being solved with methods that reminded him strongly of his old friend's approach to engineering challenges. But Jake was dead. killed in the explosion that had destroyed this very engineering bay. Commander Hayes said that Jake was trying to sabotage the fusion core when security stopped him, Danny said, but his voice lacked conviction. The official report says he caused the explosion that killed him. Maria shook her head. I read that report, and it does not make sense. Jake spent 3 years keeping this station running. Why would he suddenly try to destroy it? And the explosion damage does not match what you would expect from the sabotage methods they described. Pete was the newest member of their team, but he had worked closely with Jake in the months before the supposed sabotage. Jake was investigating power grid anomalies before he died. He thought someone was interfering with the builder systems, but Commander Hayes told him to focus on routine maintenance instead. Danny made a decision that he had been avoiding for weeks. Show me everything Jake was working on before the explosion. All his files, all his reports, everything. They spent the next several hours going through Jake's work logs and technical reports. What they found painted a picture of a careful, methodical investigation into systematic interference with Kepler, station's most critical systems. Jake had documented power fluctuations, system bypasses, and unauthorized access to builder technology, but his reports had been classified or dismissed by Hayes. Look at this, Maria said, pointing to a series of energy readings. Jake was tracking someone who was deliberately destabilizing the builder systems. These are not random failures or normal wear and tear. Someone with high-level access was causing controlled damage to force the ancient systems to activate. But who would do that? Pete asked. Danny was starting to have a terrible suspicion. Someone who wanted to study builder technology without authorization. Jake was getting close to proving that sabotage was happening, so someone framed him for sabotage to discredit his investigation. Before they could discuss it further, Commander Hayes walked into the engineering bay with 2 security officers. I hope you 3 are not wasting time on conspiracy theories, she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Dead traitors do not deserve this much attention. We are just trying to understand the power grid improvements, Danny said carefully. Someone has been doing excellent work stabilizing the energy flows. Hayes's expression hardened. Those improvements are the result of new protocols I have implemented. Perhaps you should focus on your assigned duties instead of questioning your superior's methods. After Hayes left, Danny knew they were in danger. The commander was watching them too closely, and their questions were making her nervous. But Danny also knew that Jake had been his friend for 15 years, and friends did not abandon each other just because someone in authority said they were traitors. That night, Danny was working alone in a maintenance tunnel when he heard a familiar voice call his name softly from the shadows. His heart nearly stopped when Jake Morrison stepped into the light, alive but changed by his months in the deep levels of the station. Hello, Danny, Jake said. I have been hoping you would figure out that something was wrong with the official story. Jake, you are alive. But how is that possible? The explosion, the security footage, the body they recovered. Jake quickly explained about being framed and left for dead in the maintenance tunnels. He told Danny about the underground community, the builder technology, and the conspiracy involving Hayes and Vexka. As he talked, Danny felt a mixture of relief and anger that made his hands shake. We have to tell Maria and Pete, Danny said. We have to expose what Hayes is doing. Not yet, Jake warned. Hayes is planning something big, and if we move too early, a lot of people are going to die. I need you to keep acting normal while I figure out how to stop her. But keeping normal became impossible the next day when Hayes accused Danny, Maria, and Pete of being part of Jake's sabotage network. Security came to arrest them on charges of conspiracy and treason, claiming they had been secretly working with the dead terrorist all along. Jake could not let his friends be destroyed by the same conspiracy that had tried to kill him. Using the builder communication systems, he coordinated with Lucy and the underground network to stage a rescue as the security team was transporting Danny, Maria, and Pete to detention. The rescue was Jake's first open action since being framed, and it felt good to fight back instead of hiding. Using builder technology that could scramble security sensors and lock down blast doors, the underground network extracted the 3 engineers from their guards and brought them to safety in the Deep levels. The reunion was emotional but brief. Jake's crew was amazed to see not only that he was alive, but that he had built a resistance movement in the forgotten sections of the station. Danny, Maria, and Pete quickly understood the scope of the conspiracy and the danger facing everyone. On Kepler Station, Hayes and Vexca are planning to cause a catastrophic failure in the main fusion core, Jake explained. They want to force the builder systems to activate their emergency protocols, which will give them access to technology that has been locked away for thousands of years. The explosion will kill hundreds of people and give them cover to escape, with the most valuable alien artifacts in the galaxy. Maria studied the technical data that Lucy had gathered. When do they plan to do this? In 3 days, when the Colonial Authority inspection team arrives, Jake said. They will blame the explosion on the inspectors accidentally triggering Jake Morrison's delayed sabotage devices. Pete looked around at the other members of the underground network. What can we do to stop them? Jake smiled, and his friends saw something in his expression that had not been there before he was supposedly killed. He had spent months learning to work with technology that most people could not even imagine, and he had built alliances that crossed species lines. He was no longer just an engineer trying to keep systems running. We are going to take back our station, Jake said, and we are going to make sure that Hayes and Vexca pay for what they have done. Danny grinned. Just like old times, except with alien technology and a criminal conspiracy. And we are officially dead, Maria added. That just means we have nothing left to lose, Pete said. Jake nodded. Nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Let's get to work. The battle for Kepler Station began at exactly 0800 hours, when the Colonial Authority inspection team docked at the main airlock. Hayes and Vexca had timed their catastrophic sabotage to coincide with the inspector's arrival, planning to blame the explosion on Jake Morrison's supposedly dormant terrorist devices being triggered by the inspection. But Jake was ready for them. Over the past 3 days, he had used the Builder communication network to coordinate with resistance cells throughout the station. His underground network had grown to include honest security officers, maintenance workers who had been silenced by threats, and even some Xanthari officials who had been kept in the dark about the conspiracy. The first sign that something was wrong came when Hayes tried to access the fusion core controls and found that her authorization codes had been changed. Jake had spent the night before the attack working directly with the Builder systems, using the mental interface he had developed over months of practice. The ancient computers recognized him as a legitimate engineer and granted him administrative access that superseded even Hayes's command authority. What do you mean my codes are not working? Hayes demanded over the communication system. I am the commanding officer of this engineering section. Your codes have been revoked for unauthorized access to restricted systems, came Danny Carter's voice from the main engineering control room. This is Chief Engineer Danny Carter, acting on the authority of the legitimate station command structure. Hayes realized that her conspiracy had been discovered, but she was too committed to her plan to back down. She sent Vexca and his criminal associates to take control of the engineering sections by force, while she tried to trigger the fusion core overload manually. But Jake had anticipated this move. As Hayes and her security team headed for the core chamber, they found their path blocked by blast doors that would not respond to their commands. The station's security systems had been reprogrammed by Lucy Chen, who was simultaneously broadcasting evidence of the conspiracy to every communication terminal on Kepler Station. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing the theft of minerals, communication logs revealing the plan to steal Builder technology, and security footage that proved Jake had been framed. Within minutes, every person on the station knew that Commander Hayes was a traitor and that Jake Morrison was not only innocent, but had been fighting to protect them all. Vexca and his criminal associates found themselves facing not just Jake's underground network, but also legitimate station security forces who had turned against the conspiracy. The Xanthari crime lord tried to reach his escape ship, but his path was blocked by Xanthari security officers led by Zix, who had been officially reinstated and promoted to Chief of Builder Technology Safety. You have brought dishonor to our people into this station, Zix told Vexca. The punishment for betraying the trust placed in us by the Builder legacy is severe. While his allies fought to contain the criminal conspirators, Jake faced the most dangerous part of the operation. Hayes had reached the fusion core chamber and was attempting to trigger a manual overload that would destroy the station. The builder, safety systems were trying to prevent the catastrophe, but Hayes had spent months learning how to bypass their protections. Jake arrived at the core chamber to find Hayes working frantically at a control panel while the fusion reactors began to show signs of instability. Energy readings were climbing toward dangerous levels, and the ancient safety systems were flashing warnings in languages that had been dead for millennia. "You are too late, Morrison," Hayes said, without looking up from her work. "The overload sequence has already begun. In 10 minutes, this station will be destroyed and I will escape with enough builder technology to revolutionize human space travel." Jake studied the control readings and realized that Hayes was right about the overload sequence, but wrong about everything else. The fusion reactors were approaching critical levels, but the real danger was not explosion, but chain reaction. If the cores went critical, they would trigger a resonance cascade in the builder systems that could tear a hole in space itself. "You do not understand what you are doing," Jake said. "The builder technology is not just advanced engineering. It is connected to the fundamental structure of space and time. If you destabilize the core systems, you could destroy this entire star system." Hayes laughed. "More lies from the saboteur. You tried to destroy this station once before and now you are trying to stop me from fixing your damage." Jake realized that Hayes actually believed her own propaganda. She had convinced herself that Jake was really a terrorist and that her theft of builder technology was justified as a response to his sabotage. The conspiracy had become so important to her that she could not see the truth, even when it was destroying everything around her. But Jake could see the truth clearly. The fusion core was approaching a critical state that would trigger systems the builders had designed as a last resort. If someone did not stop the overload in the next few minutes, Kepler Station would become the center of a spatial anomaly that could swallow planets. Jake knew what he had to do, even though it would probably kill him. The builder systems required a direct neural interface to perform emergency shutdown procedures, and human brains were not designed to handle that kind of connection. But Jake had spent months learning to communicate with the ancient computers, and he was the only person who might be able to make the interface work. "I am sorry, Hayes," Jake said. And then he placed his hands on the builder control interface and opened his mind to the vast intelligence that had been sleeping in Kepler Station for thousands of years. The connection was like being struck by lightning made of pure thought. Jake felt his consciousness expand to encompass the entire station, sensing every system, every inhabitant, every quantum fluctuation in the space around them. The builder technology welcomed him like a friend returning after a long journey, and Jake understood that the ancient computers had been waiting for someone who could think like an engineer and care like a human. Working together with the builder systems, Jake began the delicate process of shutting down the overload while preserving the station's life support and structural integrity. The fusion reactors fought against the shutdown, but Jake and his alien partners gradually brought them back under control. When the crisis was over, Jake expected to die from the neural feedback, but instead he found that his connection to the builder systems had stabilized. He was still human, but now he was also something more, a bridge between human determination and alien wisdom. Hayes was arrested along with Vexka and the other conspirators. The evidence Lucy had broadcast led to investigations that exposed corruption throughout the Colonial Development Authority and resulted in major reforms in human-alien relations. Jake was officially reinstated with honors and promoted to chief engineer of Kepler Station, but his real job had become something much more important. Jake spent his days teaching other engineers from multiple species how to work safely with builder technology. He had learned that the ancient systems were not meant to be hoarded by any one species, but shared among all who were wise enough to use them responsibly. Humanity's place in the galaxy would not be earned through theft or conquest, but through cooperation and the kind of determination that could turn a betrayed engineer into a bridge between worlds. The last entry in Jake Morrison's personal log. Read. Today I taught a class on builder interface protocols to students from 6 different species. Danny, Maria, and Pete are all learning to communicate with the ancient systems in their own ways. We are not just maintaining Kepler Station anymore. We are preparing for humanity's real future among the stars, earned through engineering excellence, and the kind of stubborn refusal to give up that makes us human. Jake had been living in the deep levels for almost a month when he met Lucy Chen, and everything changed. Lucy was a small woman with quick hands and quicker eyes, who had been a data systems specialist before being fired for asking too many questions about missing cargo manifests. She had been hiding in the maintenance tunnels for 6 months and had turned herself into something between a spy and a ghost. The thing about living down here, Lucy explained as she showed Jake her hidden workshop, is that all the information in the station flows through these tunnels at some point. Data cables, communication lines, security feeds, even the personal messages that people think are private. If you know where to look and how to listen, you can hear everything that happens. Up there, Lucy had built a collection of improvised computers and communication devices using salvaged parts and builder technology that she barely understood, but somehow made work. Her workshop was hidden inside what looked like a broken waste recycling unit, but inside it was filled with screens showing data streams from all over the station. "I have been tracking the people who framed you," Lucy said, bringing up files on one of her screens. "Commander Hayes is working with someone called Vex Ka, who runs the largest smuggling operation in this sector. They have been stealing rare minerals from the cargo shipments that pass through Kepler Station, but that is just the beginning." Jake studied the data Lucy had collected. Financial records, cargo manifests, and communication logs painted a picture of a conspiracy that reached back to Earth itself. Hayes and Vex Ka were not just thieves, but were working for people in the Colonial Development Authority who needed money for black budget projects. "The minerals they are stealing are not for sale," Lucy continued. "They are being used to fund research into builder technology. Someone back on Earth has figured out that the old alien tech could revolutionize space travel, and they want to reverse engineer it before any other species gets the same idea." This explained why Jake had been framed rather than simply killed. His investigation into the power grid problems had threatened to expose the systematic damage being done to the builder systems. By making him look like a saboteur, they could explain away any evidence of their real sabotage as the work of a crazy engineer. Jake realized that Zix and the other exiled Zenthari were also victims of the same conspiracy. Anyone who questioned the changes being made to the station's systems was being removed one way or another. The conspiracy needed people to believe that the power fluctuations and system failures were normal problems or the result of terrorism, not evidence of organized theft. "We need to do something about this," Jake said. Lucy smiled in a way that made Jake think she had been waiting for him to say exactly that. "I was hoping you would feel that way. I have been watching and listening for months, but I am just one person with limited resources. You know how these systems really work, and Zix understands the builder technology better than anyone alive. Together we might be able to fight back." Over the next several weeks, Jake, Lucy, and Zix began building what they called the Underground Network. They recruited others from the hidden community, each person bringing their own skills and knowledge. Danny Murphy knew the mining operations where some of the stolen minerals were processed. Lisa Park had contacts among the medical staff who treated workers injured in accidents that were really sabotage. The other exiled Zenthari provided information about which parts of the ancient systems were being targeted. The network became more than just a group of outcasts sharing information. Jake used his engineering skills to help them tap into the station's communication systems without being detected. Zix showed them how to access builder technology that could hide their activities from both human and Zenthari security. Lucy coordinated everything, turning their scattered knowledge into actionable intelligence. Their first real operation was small but important. Hayes and Vex Ka were planning to cause a controlled failure in one of the water recycling systems, blaming it on damage from Jake's supposed sabotage attempt. The failure would force the activation of builder backup systems that they could then study and reverse engineer. Jake could not let innocent people suffer from contaminated water just so the conspirators could steal alien technology. Working with Zix, he accessed the builder systems directly and created a bypass that would prevent the failure while making it look like the backup systems had activated naturally. Hayes and Vex Ka got their data, but no one was hurt. And Jake learned something important about how the builder technology responded to human mental patterns. The old systems are not just machines, Jake explained to the others after the operation. They are designed to work with living minds. The builders must have been telepathic or had some kind of direct neural interface with their technology. This discovery opened up new possibilities for their resistance activities. Jake found that he could communicate with the builder systems in limited ways, not through telepathy but through the kind of logical thinking that made him a good engineer. The ancient computers seemed to recognize his problem-solving approach and responded by providing access to functions that even Zix had never seen. As their capabilities grew, so did their ambitions. The underground network began actively sabotaging the conspirators' operations while protecting the station's infrastructure and inhabitants. When Hayes tried to cause power failures, Jake rerouted energy through builder systems that could handle the load. When Vexka attempted to steal mineral shipments, Lucy leaked information to honest security officers who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Most importantly, Jake began leaving coded messages for his old crew in places where only they would think to look. He used engineering signatures that Danny Carter would recognize, power routing patterns that Maria Santos would understand, and maintenance schedules that Pete Williams would notice. Slowly and carefully, he started trying to tell his friends that he was alive and that they had been lied to. The messages had to be subtle because Hayes was watching Jake's old crew carefully. She had promoted Danny to chief engineer but kept him under close supervision. Maria and Pete were assigned to routine maintenance work that kept them away from the critical systems where they might notice evidence of sabotage. But Jake knew his people, and he knew they were smart enough to recognize his work if they saw it. Engineers had their own ways of doing things, like signatures in the way they solved problems. If his crew saw enough examples of his engineering solutions, they would start to question the official story about his death. The real breakthrough came when Lucy intercepted communications showing that Hayes and Vex-Ka were accelerating their timeline. Colonial Authority inspectors were coming to Kepler Station in 2 months, and the conspirators needed to complete their theft of builder technology before the inspection revealed evidence of their crimes. They are planning something big, Lucy warned during one of their meetings in the hidden workshop. Not just another controlled failure, but a major catastrophe that will give them access to the core builder systems while providing cover for their escape. Jake felt a chill as he realized what this meant. The conspirators were willing to risk destroying Kepler Station and killing thousands of people just to steal alien technology. They had already shown they were willing to frame innocent people and cause smaller disasters. A major catastrophe would be the perfect cover for their crimes. The underground network had become skilled at small-scale sabotage and protection, but stopping a major disaster would require them to come out of hiding and fight openly. Jake looked around at his friends in the forgotten sections of the station and knew they were ready for whatever came next.